The letter arrived 3 days after the funeral, and Amelia Taylor held it in her trembling hands as the stagecoach rattled toward an uncertain future in the wilds of Colorado Territory. It was spring of 1878, and the road from Denver to Fort Garland stretched endlessly before her, each jarring bump reminding her that everything she had known was gone. Her father had died suddenly, leaving her with nothing but debts and the discovery that he had been corresponding with someone she had never heard of. The letter was brief, written in a strong, slanted hand. "Come to the Double X Ranch outside Fort Garland. There is a place for you here. Your father and I had an understanding." It was signed simply, Maxwell Xerxes. Amelia was 22 years old, had taught school for 3 years in a small Kansas town, and now found herself with no prospects, no family, and no choices. The lawyer who had settled her father's meager estate had been blunt. She could accept this mysterious invitation, or she could try to find work in Denver as a seamstress or laundress, competing with dozens of other women for the same positions. The West was supposed to offer opportunities, but for a woman alone, those opportunities were narrow and often grim. She had packed what little she owned into a single carpet bag and used the last of her money for the stagecoach fare. Now, as the mountains rose around her and the air grew thinner and colder, she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. What if this Maxwell Xerxes was a cruel man, or worse? What if her father's understanding was something that bound her to some arrangement she could not stomach? But then, what choice did she have? She had already committed to this path. The stagecoach driver, a grizzled man with tobacco-stained teeth, called back to her and the 2 other passengers. "Fort Garland coming up, about another hour." Amelia clutched her carpetbag tighter and watched the landscape transform. They were in the San Luis Valley now, surrounded by towering peaks still capped with snow. The valley floor was vast and open, covered in scrubby grass and sage. It was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way, so different from the gentle rolling hills of Kansas. Fort Garland itself was a small settlement clustered around an old military post. The fort had been active during the conflicts with various tribes in the Civil War, but now it seemed quieter, though soldiers still patrolled the area. The town consisted of a single main street with a general store, a saloon, a boarding house, a blacksmith, and a few other essential buildings. Wooden structures with false fronts tried to present an air of permanence, but everything looked dusty and temporary, as though a strong wind might blow it all away. The stage stopped in front of the general store, and Amelia climbed down carefully, her legs stiff from the long journey. She stood on the wooden boardwalk, feeling the eyes of curious townsfolk on her. A woman traveling alone always attracted attention, usually unwelcome. "You being met, miss?" the driver asked as he hauled luggage down from the top of the coach. "I believe so," Amelia said, though she had no idea if it was true. The letter had said nothing about meeting her. "Double X Ranch, you said earlier." The driver scratched his beard. "That is about 5 miles west of here. Maxwell Xerxes owns it. Good man, keeps to himself mostly. Lost his wife some years back." Amelia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. A widower. That complicated things. Before she could ask anything else, the driver tipped his hat and climbed back onto the coach. Within minutes, the stage was rattling away, leaving her standing alone on the boardwalk. She was about to enter the general store to ask about hiring someone to take her to the ranch when she heard the sound of hoofbeats. A man on a large bay horse rode down the street, moving with the easy confidence of someone completely at home in the saddle. He was tall. She could see that even mounted, with broad shoulders and dark hair that needed cutting. He wore work clothes, a dusty shirt and worn denim pants, a bandana around his neck, and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. As he drew closer, he slowed the horse and looked directly at her. "You would be Amelia Taylor," he said. It was not a question. "I am," she replied, lifting her chin. "And you are Maxwell Xerxes." He dismounted in a smooth motion and removed his hat. His face was weathered and tanned, with lines around his eyes that suggested he spent all his time outdoors. He looked to be in his early 30s, with a strong jaw and serious dark eyes. There was something guarded in his expression, but also something decent. She had learned to read men's faces during her teaching years, to spot the cruel ones, the dishonest ones. This man seemed tired and wary, but not dangerous. "I am," he said. "Your father wrote to me some months back. I am sorry for your loss." "Thank you." She paused, uncertain how to proceed. "I received your letter, but I must confess I do not understand what arrangement you had with my father." Maxwell looked around at the small crowd that was beginning to gather, attracted by the novelty of a strange woman and a conversation that promised intrigue. His jaw tightened. "This is not a conversation for the street. Would you be willing to come to the ranch? I give you my word that you will be safe and treated with respect. If you do not like what you hear, I will bring you back to town tomorrow and pay for a room at the boarding house until you decide what you want to do." It was a fair offer, more than fair. Amelia nodded. "All right." Maxwell tied her carpetbag to the saddle and then looked at her. "Can you ride?" "Not well," she admitted. "I have only ridden a few times." "Then you will ride with me. It is easier than trying to manage a horse you do not know." He mounted and then extended his hand to her. After a moment's hesitation, she took it. His grip was strong and calloused, and he pulled her up behind him as though she weighed nothing. "Hold on," he said quietly. Amelia wrapped her arms around his waist, feeling awkward and intensely aware of the impropriety, but there was no other choice. As they rode out of town, she felt the stares following them and knew that by tomorrow, everyone in Fort Garland would have a theory about who she was and why she had come. The ride to the ranch took about 40 minutes at an easy pace. Maxwell did not try to make conversation, and Amelia was grateful. She needed time to think, to process everything that was happening. The valley spread out around them, vast and empty except for the occasional homestead or herd of cattle in the distance. The mountains loomed on all sides, purple and blue in the afternoon light. It was achingly beautiful and terribly lonely. The Double X Ranch appeared gradually, first as a cluster of buildings in the distance, then resolving into a main house, a large barn, several outbuildings, and a network of corrals. It was a working ranch, that was clear. She could see cattle grazing on the slopes, and there were horses in one of the corrals. The main house was a sturdy log structure with a covered porch, larger than she had expected. Smoke curled from the chimney. Maxwell rode up to the house and dismounted, then helped her down. "Come inside," he said. "We can talk properly." The interior of the house was simple but well kept. There was a main room with a stone fireplace, a heavy wooden table with chairs, and a few other pieces of furniture that looked handmade but solid. A door led off to what she assumed were bedrooms. Everything was clean, she noticed. No dust, no clutter. Either Maxwell was unusually fastidious for a bachelor rancher or he had help. "Sit, please," Maxwell said, gesturing to the table. "I will make coffee." Amelia sat, folding her hands in her lap, and watched as he moved around the room with practiced efficiency. He built up the fire in the cookstove, filled a pot with water from a bucket, and measured out coffee grounds. His movements were economical and sure, those of a man who had been taking care of himself for a long time. When the coffee was brewing, he sat down across from her and met her eyes. "I suppose I should start at the beginning," he said. "Your father and I served together during the war. We were in the same unit, fought in several battles together. He saved my life once in Tennessee. I never forgot that." Amelia nodded slowly. Her father had rarely spoken of the war, but she knew he had served. It had changed him, her mother had said, made him quieter and sadder. "After the war, we lost touch for many years," Maxwell continued. "I came out here to Colorado, bought this land, built this ranch. Your father stayed in Kansas, married, had you. Then about 6 months ago, I received a letter from him. He said he was ill, that he did not have much time. He asked me if I would do something for him." "What did he ask?" Amelia's voice was barely above a whisper. Maxwell rose and poured coffee for both of them, then sat back down. "He asked me to take care of you if anything happened to him. He said you were a good girl, smart and hardworking, but that you would have no one and nothing when he was gone. He knew what happens to women alone in this world. He asked me to give you a home, a place where you could be safe." Amelia felt tears prick her eyes but blinked them back. It sounded exactly like something her father would do, trying to protect her even from beyond the grave. But it also raised so many questions. "And you agreed, just like that. You do not know me. Why would you take on such a responsibility?" "Because I owed him my life," Maxwell said simply. "And because I understand what it means to have nowhere to go." He paused, his fingers wrapped around the coffee cup. "When my wife died 4 years ago, I thought about leaving this place, just walking away from everything. But I had the ranch. I had something to do every day, a reason to get up in the morning. Your father gave me my life back in Tennessee. The least I can do is give you a chance at a life here." "What exactly are you offering me?" Amelia asked carefully. She needed to understand the terms, what he expected from her. Maxwell took a deep breath. "A place to live. A room of your own in this house. Meals, safety. I am not proposing marriage if that is what you are worried about. I am not asking you to be anything other than what you are. You can help around the ranch if you want or not. Eventually, if you want to return to teaching, I can help you find a position in Fort Garland or one of the other towns. This is simply a refuge until you figure out what you want." It was more than generous. It was almost unbelievable. Amelia studied his face, looking for signs of deception or hidden motives, but found none. He looked tired and sincere, a man trying to repay an old debt. "Why are you not married?" she asked bluntly. "Forgive me, but ranchers usually need wives. Why have you remained alone?" A shadow crossed Maxwell's face. "Because I loved my wife, and when she died, something in me died too. I have no interest in replacing her." His voice was flat, final. "I am sorry," Amelia said quietly. "I did not mean to pry. It is a fair question." Maxwell drained his coffee. "So what do you say? Will you stay, at least for a while?" Amelia thought about her options, which were limited to non-existent. She could refuse and ask him to take her back to town, but then what? She had no money, no prospects. She could try to find work, but it would be hard and possibly dangerous. Or she could accept this strange, generous offer from a man who had known her father, who seemed decent and honest. It was a gamble, but everything in life was a gamble. "I will stay," she said. "Thank you." Maxwell nodded, and for the first time she saw something like relief in his eyes. "Good. I will show you to your room. There is a woman who comes from town 3 times a week to help with laundry and heavy cleaning. Her name is Mrs. Garcia. She will be here tomorrow, and I am sure she will be glad to have another woman around." He led her to a small bedroom off the main room. It had a narrow bed with a patchwork quilt, a chest of drawers, a washstand with a basin and pitcher, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. It was simple but clean and private, more than she had dared hope for. "I will leave you to settle in," Maxwell said. Supper will be ready in about an hour. Nothing fancy, just stew and bread. I can help, Amelia offered. I am a good cook. He hesitated, then nodded. All right. I would appreciate that. After he left, Amelia sat on the bed and let out a long, shaky breath. She had done it. She had traveled hundreds of miles to a place she had never been, to meet a man she had never heard of, and somehow it seemed like it might actually be all right. She thought of her father, of the last time she had seen him, weak and pale in his bed. He had gripped her hand and told her not to worry, that everything would be taken care of. She had not understood then, but now she did. He had reached out to an old friend, had called in a debt, had made sure she would not be left alone and destitute. It was the last gift he could give her, and she felt a wave of gratitude and grief so strong it made her chest ache. She allowed herself a few minutes to cry quietly, then washed her face in the basin and unpacked her few belongings. When she emerged from the bedroom, Maxwell was at the stove, stirring a pot. She joined him, and together they prepared a simple meal in companionable silence. That first evening set the pattern for the days that followed. Amelia woke early, helped prepare breakfast, and then found tasks to occupy herself while Maxwell went out to work the ranch. He had 2 hired men who lived in the bunkhouse and helped with the cattle and horses. Their names were Jim and Tom, and they were polite but kept their distance, unsure what to make of her presence. Mrs. Garcia arrived the next day, a stout, cheerful woman in her 50s with dark eyes and a ready smile. She spoke English with a heavy accent and seemed delighted to have Amelia there. Finally, another woman, she said, clasping Amelia's hands. This house, it has been too quiet, too sad. You will bring life back to it, I think. I hope so, Amelia said, though she was not sure what she could bring to this place. Mrs. Garcia proved to be a fountain of information. She had lived in the valley her whole life, had raised 6 children, and knew everyone within 50 miles. She told Amelia about the other ranchers, the families in town, the history of Fort Garland. She also spoke carefully about Maxwell. He was different before his wife died, Mrs. Garcia said as they scrubbed laundry together in the yard. Happy, you know. He would laugh, make jokes. But when Maria passed, it was like the light went out of him. She died having their baby, and the baby died too, a little girl. He buried them both on the hill behind the house. After that, he just worked and worked from sunup to sundown, like he was trying to forget. Amelia felt a deep pang of sympathy. She understood grief, the way it could hollow you out and leave you going through the motions of life without really living. That is terrible, she murmured. It was 4 years ago now, Mrs. Garcia said, wringing out a shirt with strong hands. I keep hoping he will find happiness again, but he keeps everyone at arm's length. Maybe you will be good for him being here. I do not think he wants anything from me except to fulfill a promise, Amelia said honestly. Mrs. Garcia gave her a knowing look. We will see. Sometimes God has plans we do not expect. As the days turned into weeks, Amelia began to find her place on the ranch. She took over most of the cooking, which Maxwell seemed grateful for. She tended a small vegetable garden behind the house, mended clothes, and helped Mrs. Garcia with the endless round of cleaning. She learned to collect eggs from the chickens, to milk the cow, to churn butter. It was hard physical work, so different from teaching, but she found it satisfying in a way she had not anticipated. Maxwell remained polite but distant. They ate meals together and exchanged pleasantries, but he never spoke of anything personal. He was up before dawn and often did not return until after dark, exhausted and covered in dust. Amelia could see the toll the work took on him, the way he moved stiffly sometimes, the deep fatigue in his eyes. She wanted to help more to ease his burden, but she did not know how. One evening in early summer, About 6 weeks after her arrival, a storm rolled in from the mountains. The wind picked up suddenly, and the sky turned dark and threatening. Amelia was in the house preparing supper when she heard shouting from outside. She ran to the window and saw Maxwell and the hired men driving a small herd of horses into the corral, trying to get them secured before the storm hit. Without thinking, she grabbed a shawl and ran outside. The wind nearly knocked her over, and the first fat drops of rain were beginning to fall. "What can I do?" she shouted to Maxwell. He looked startled to see her. "Get back inside. It is not safe. Tell me what to do," she insisted. He hesitated, then pointed to the barn. "Help Jim get the barn doors secured. And make sure the cattle in the near pasture have not broken through the fence." Amelia ran to the barn, where Jim was struggling to close the heavy doors against the wind. Together, they managed to wrestle them shut and drop the bar. Then she followed him to the pasture, clinging to the fence as the wind tore at her clothes and the rain began to fall in sheets. The cattle were huddled together, shifting nervously but not panicking. The fence looked secure. By the time they made it back to the house, Amelia was soaked through and shivering. Maxwell and Tom were already inside, dripping water onto the floor. Maxwell took one look at her and frowned. "You should not have come out. You could have been hurt." "So could you," she retorted, wringing water from her hair. "I am not some fragile thing that needs to be protected from a little rain." "That was not a little rain," Maxwell said, but there was something new in his voice, a hint of respect. "But thank you. We got everything secured before the worst of it hit." The storm raged outside for hours, thunder echoing through the valley and lightning illuminating the windows in brilliant flashes. Amelia made hot coffee and served the stew she had prepared earlier, and the four of them sat around the table, warming themselves and listening to the fury outside. It felt oddly companionable, like they were all in it together. After Jim and Tom headed to the bunkhouse, Maxwell sat by the fire staring into the flames. Amelia cleaned up the supper dishes and then joined him, sitting in the other chair. The storm was beginning to ease, the thunder growing more distant. "You did well tonight," Maxwell said quietly. "Most women would have stayed inside." "I am not most women," Amelia said. "I grew up helping my father. He did not have a son, so he taught me what he could. I know I do not have the strength for a lot of ranch work, but I am not useless." Maxwell turned to look at her, really look at her, perhaps for the first time since she had arrived. "I never thought you were useless. I just did not want you to feel obligated to do more than you wanted." "I want to be helpful," Amelia said. "I want to earn my keep." "You already do," Maxwell said. "Having you here, it makes this place feel less empty. I did not realize how much I had been living like a hermit until you arrived." It was the most personal thing he had said to her, and Amelia felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. "I am glad I came," she said softly. "I was frightened when I first arrived, but now I think this might be exactly where I am supposed to be." Maxwell held her gaze for a long moment, and something shifted between them, something subtle but significant. Then he looked back at the fire. "You should get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day checking for damage from the storm." Amelia nodded and rose, but as she reached her bedroom door, she paused. "Maxwell, thank you for giving me a chance. I know you did it for my father, but it means everything to me." "You are welcome," he said, his voice rough. "Sleep well, Amelia." In the weeks that followed, Amelia noticed a change in Maxwell. He was still reserved, still carried that sadness with him, but he seemed more present, more willing to engage in conversation. They began to talk over meals, sharing stories from their pasts. He told her about learning to ranch, about the challenges of surviving in Colorado's harsh climate, about the cattle drives and the endless work. She told him about teaching, about the children she had loved instructing, about her father and the quiet life they had led. She learned that he was 33 years old, that he had come from Missouri originally, that he had dreams of building the Double X into one of the premier ranches in the valley. He had a dry sense of humor that emerged occasionally, surprising her with its wit. He was also incredibly hardworking, often pushing himself to exhaustion. More than once, Amelia had to insist he sit down and eat a proper meal instead of just grabbing something and heading back out. "You will work yourself into an early grave," she scolded him one afternoon after he had come in for lunch looking gray with fatigue. "There is too much to do," he said, but he sat down and let her serve him a plate of roast chicken and vegetables. "There will always be too much to do," Amelia said, "but you are no good to anyone if you collapse." Maxwell gave her a faint smile. "You sound like my mother. Good. Someone needs to look after you." She paused, then added more gently, "You do not have to do everything alone, you know. You have Jim and Tom. You have me, for whatever help I can offer." "I know," Maxwell said quietly. "I am trying to remember that." By midsummer, Amelia had been at the ranch for 3 months, and it felt like home in a way nowhere else ever had. She loved the routine of the days, the physical work, the satisfaction of a meal well cooked or a garden well tended. She loved the landscape, the way the mountains changed color with the light, the vast open sky, the sudden fierce storms that swept through. She even loved the isolation, the sense of being removed from the pressures and judgments of society. But most of all, though she was only beginning to admit it to herself, she loved being near Maxwell. She found herself watching for him during the day, listening for his footsteps on the porch. She noticed everything about him, the way he moved, the rare smiles, the gentleness with which he handled the horses, the quiet strength he radiated. She knew she was developing feelings for him, feelings that went beyond gratitude or friendship. But she also knew that he was not ready for such things, might never be ready. His heart was still bound to his dead wife, and Amelia would not intrude on that grief. One Saturday, Maxwell announced that he needed to go into Fort Garland for supplies and asked if she would like to come along. Amelia agreed eagerly. She had not been to town since the day she arrived, and she was curious to see it again, to perhaps meet some of the people Mrs. Garcia had told her about. They rode in together on the wagon, a journey of about an hour. Maxwell was quiet as usual, but it was a comfortable silence. When they reached town, he helped her down from the wagon and gave her some money. "For whatever you need," he said. "I will be at the feed store and the blacksmith. Meet me back here in an hour." Amelia nodded and watched him walk away, then turned to explore. Fort Garland was busier than it had been on the day she arrived. It was Saturday, and people had come in from the surrounding ranches and homesteads. She went into the general store, a large cluttered space that smelled of coffee and leather and pickles. The proprietor, a thin man with spectacles, greeted her politely, and she began to browse. She was examining a bolt of fabric when she heard a woman's voice behind her. "You must be the woman staying at the Xerxes place." Amelia turned to find a woman about her own age, pretty and blonde, wearing a fashionable dress that seemed out of place in this frontier town. Her expression was curious but not unfriendly. "I am," Amelia said. "Amelia Taylor." "I am Annabelle Thornton," the woman said, extending a hand. "My father owns the bank. I heard you arrived a few months ago. Everyone has been talking about it." "I imagine they have," Amelia said dryly. She shook the offered hand. Annabelle laughed. "Do not worry, it is mostly just curiosity. There are not many single women around here, and Maxwell Xerxes has been alone for so long that people had just about given up on him." She leaned in conspiratorially. "Are you two going to get married?" Amelia felt her cheeks heat. "No, it is not like that. Maxwell was a friend of my father's. He has given me a place to stay, that is all." "What a shame," Annabelle said, though she looked relieved. "Well, if you ever need anything or just want female company, you are welcome to visit. We live above the bank. I get terribly bored sometimes." "Thank you," Amelia said, warming to her. "I will remember that." They chatted for a few more minutes before Annabelle excused herself. Amelia finished her shopping, purchasing some thread, needles, and a few other small items. She was heading back to the wagon when she nearly collided with a man on the boardwalk. "Pardon me," she said, stepping back. The man looked her up and down in a way that made her skin crawl. He was in his 40s with a fleshy face and hard eyes. "You are the woman living with Maxwell Xerxes," he said. It sounded like an accusation. "I am staying at his ranch, yes," Amelia said coolly, trying to move past him. He blocked her path. "That is a nice arrangement for you. A woman alone, no means of support, living in a house with a man who is not her husband. Folks might start to talk." Amelia felt a flash of anger. "Folks will talk no matter what I do," she said. "Now please excuse me." She pushed past him and hurried to the wagon where Maxwell was already loading sacks of grain. He took one look at her face and frowned. "What happened?" "Nothing," she said, but her hands were shaking. "Just an unpleasant man." Maxwell's expression darkened. "Who? I do not know his name. A heavy-set man, older with small eyes." "That sounds like Frank Garrett," Maxwell said, his voice hard. "He owns the saloon. He is a bully and a gossip. What did he say to you?" Amelia hesitated, then repeated the conversation. Maxwell's jaw tightened. "I will speak to him." "No," Amelia said quickly. "Please just leave it. I do not want to cause trouble." "He is the one causing trouble," Maxwell said, but he seemed to struggle with himself and finally nodded. "All right, but if he bothers you again, you tell me." They rode back to the ranch in tense silence. Amelia felt guilty for upsetting Maxwell and also angry at Frank Garrett for making her feel ashamed of a perfectly respectable arrangement. But beneath that was worry. What if people did start to talk? What if her presence here damaged Maxwell's reputation? That evening after supper, she brought it up. "Maxwell, perhaps I should look for another place to stay, if my being here is going to cause problems for you." "Stop," Maxwell said firmly. "You are not going anywhere. Let people talk. I do not care what they think." "But I do not want to make your life harder," Amelia protested. Maxwell stood and walked to the window, staring out at the darkening mountains. "Amelia, for 4 years I have been going through the motions of living. I work until I am too exhausted to think, and then I sleep, and then I do it all again. I have not cared about anything or anyone. But since you came here, I have started to remember what it feels like to have someone to talk to share a meal with. This house feels like a home again instead of just a place I sleep. Do you understand? You are not making my life harder, you are making it bearable." Amelia stood as well, her heart pounding. "I feel the same way," she said quietly. "This place, being here with you, it has given me something I did not even know I was missing." Maxwell turned to face her, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. There was longing there, and confusion, and something like fear. "I do not know how to do this," he said hoarsely. "I swore I would never care for anyone again, that it was not worth the pain. But I find myself thinking about you when I should be thinking about work. I watch for you in the morning. I listen for your voice, and it terrifies me." Amelia crossed the room slowly, her eyes never leaving his. "It terrifies me too," she admitted. "I never expected to feel this way. I thought I would just be grateful for a safe place to live, but it has become so much more than that." They stood facing each other, the air between them charged with everything they had not said. Then, very gently, Maxwell reached out and touched her cheek. His hand was rough and warm, and Amelia leaned into it, closing her eyes. I do not want to dishonor my wife's memory, Maxwell said, his voice breaking. I loved her so much. I know, Amelia whispered. And I would never ask you to forget her. But Maxwell, she is gone. You are still here, still alive. You deserve to be happy again. A single tear slid down Maxwell's cheek, and Amelia reached up to wipe it away. The gesture seemed to break something in him, and suddenly he was pulling her close, holding her tightly, his face buried in her hair. She wrapped her arms around him, feeling him shake with suppressed sobs. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the fading light, two wounded people finding solace in each other's arms. When Maxwell finally pulled back, his eyes were red but clearer than she had ever seen them. I am sorry, he said. I did not mean to. Do not apologize, Amelia said. You have been carrying so much alone for so long. You are allowed to grieve and you are allowed to move forward when you are ready. I think I might be ready, Maxwell said slowly. Or at least I want to try, if you are willing to be patient with me. I have nowhere else to be, Amelia said with a soft smile, and nowhere else I would rather be. Maxwell smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face, and Amelia felt her heart soar. He leaned down and kissed her forehead gently, a promise of more to come. Thank you, he murmured. For coming here, for staying, for giving me a reason to hope again. Thank you for giving me a home, Amelia replied. From that night on, everything was different. Maxwell began to court her properly in his quiet, serious way. He brought her wildflowers from the meadows. He taught her to ride better, spending patient hours with her in the corral. They took walks together in the evenings, exploring the ranch and talking about everything and nothing. He told her more about his late wife, about the life they had planned together, and Amelia listened without jealousy, understanding that Maria would always be a part of him. Amelia, in turn, opened up about her own losses and fears. She told him about her loneliness after her mother died when she was 16, about the burden of caring for her ailing father, about the terror she had felt when the lawyer told her she was alone and penniless. Maxwell listened and understood, and together they began to heal. The people in Fort Garland noticed the change, of course. Mrs. Garcia was delighted, declaring that she had known all along that they were meant for each other. Annabelle Thornton congratulated Amelia when she next came to town. And even Frank Garrett kept his opinions to himself, perhaps warned off by someone. By the time autumn arrived, painting the aspen trees gold and sending flocks of geese honking overhead, Amelia and Maxwell were deeply in love. It was different from what either of them had experienced before. It was a mature love, born of shared grief and mutual respect, tempered by loss but strong because of it. They knew the fragility of life, the preciousness of each moment. One evening in late September, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Maxwell took her hand. "Amelia, I have something to ask you." She looked at him, her heart already knowing what was coming. "I know we have not been together long, not in the formal sense," Maxwell said. "But I feel like I have known you forever. You have brought light back into my life, and I do not want to spend another day without you. Will you marry me? Will you stay here and build a life with me?" Amelia felt tears of joy spill down her cheeks. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Maxwell, I will marry you. I cannot imagine being anywhere else or with anyone else." Maxwell slipped a simple gold band onto her finger. It was not fancy, but it fit perfectly, and Amelia knew she would treasure it always. He pulled her close and kissed her, a real kiss this time, full of love and promise. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "When?" he asked. "When do you want to get married?" "Soon," Amelia said. "As soon as we can arrange it. I do not need a big wedding, I just need you." They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at Fort Garland's small church. Mrs. Garcia and her husband served as witnesses, along with Jim and Tom. Annabelle Thornton came, as did several other townspeople who had come to respect the quiet rancher and the woman who had brought him back to life. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, and when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Maxwell kissed Amelia with a tenderness that made several of the women in attendance dab at their eyes. They held a small celebration at the ranch afterward, with food and music and dancing. It was the first party the Double X had seen in years, and everyone seemed determined to make it joyful. As the sun set and the guests began to leave, Amelia and Maxwell stood together, watching the last wagon disappear down the road. "Happy?" Maxwell asked, his arm around her waist. "Happier than I have ever been," Amelia said honestly. "Who would have thought when I arrived here with nothing but a letter that I would find everything I ever wanted?" "I thought the same thing when you stepped off that stage," Maxwell admitted. "I was so angry at your father for asking me to take you in. I did not want to care about anyone again. But the moment I saw you, standing there so brave and so lost, something in me knew you were meant to be here." "You never told me that," Amelia said, turning to look at him. "I did not realize it myself until much later," Maxwell said. "But it is true. You belong here now, Amelia. Not because of your father's letter, not because of some debt I owed, but because you belong with me and I belong with you." They went inside then, to the home they would share, and began their life together as husband and wife. The first months of marriage were a period of adjustment and deepening love. Amelia threw herself into making the house truly a home, adding curtains and pillows, planting more flowers in the spring, learning to cook the foods Maxwell loved best. Maxwell, for his part, became more open, more willing to share his thoughts and feelings, to laugh and tease and show affection. They worked together to run the ranch, a true partnership. Amelia learned to keep the accounts, to help with branding and roundups, to doctor sick animals. Maxwell learned to slow down sometimes, to take a day off to fish in the creek or ride into the mountains just for the pleasure of it. They talked about the future, about expanding the herd, about maybe hiring more help so they could travel a bit, see some of the places they had only heard about. The first winter of their marriage was harsh, with deep snows and bitter cold. They spent long evenings by the fire, reading aloud to each other, playing cards, talking about their dreams. It was during one of those evenings in the depths of February that Amelia realized she had missed her monthly courses. She waited another week, and then another, afraid to hope. Finally, she told Maxwell. "I think I might be with child," she said quietly one night as they prepared for bed. Maxwell went very still. Then he turned to her, his eyes wide. "Are you certain?" "Not completely," Amelia admitted, "but I think so. Are you? Are you all right?" "I know this might bring back difficult memories." Maxwell crossed the room and took her hands in his. "I will not lie to you. It does frighten me. When Maria died, I thought I would die too, the idea of going through that again." He swallowed hard. "But I also know that we cannot live in fear. And the thought of having a child with you, of our family growing, it makes me happier than I can say." Amelia threw her arms around him, relieved. "I am frightened too," she confessed, "but we will face it together." As winter gave way to spring, Amelia's pregnancy became undeniable. Mrs. Garcia was overjoyed and immediately began offering advice and fussing over her. Annabelle brought baby clothes her own children had outgrown. Even the hired men seemed pleased, congratulating Maxwell with gruff good wishes. Maxwell became almost comically protective, insisting that Amelia not lift anything heavy, not work too hard, not do anything that might put her or the baby at risk. Amelia bore it patiently, knowing it came from love and old grief. She felt well, better than she had expected, and as the summer progressed, she delighted in the changes in her body, the first flutters of movement, the growing proof of new life. They talked about names, about what kind of parents they wanted to be, about the future they would build together. Maxwell was determined that this child and any others they might have would know they were loved and wanted. Amelia felt the same way. She thought often of her own parents, wishing they could have known about this, knowing they would have been happy for her. In late August, as the heat of summer began to ease, Amelia went into labor. Maxwell immediately sent Tom riding for the doctor in Fort Garland, while Mrs. Garcia arrived to help. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Maxwell, pacing outside the bedroom, thought he might lose his mind with worry. But Amelia was strong, and Mrs. Garcia was experienced, and finally, in the early hours of the morning, a baby's cry rang through the house. Mrs. Garcia opened the door, her face beaming. "You have a son," she said, "and your wife is tired but well. Come and meet him." Maxwell entered the room on shaking legs. Amelia lay in the bed, pale and exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny bundle. He approached slowly, almost afraid to look, but then Amelia held the baby out to him. "Meet your son," she said softly. Maxwell took the baby carefully, hardly able to believe something so small and perfect could be real. The infant had a cap of dark hair and his mother's delicate features. As Maxwell watched, the tiny eyes opened, unfocused but searching. Something in Maxwell's chest cracked open and he felt tears streaming down his face. "He is beautiful," he whispered. "You are both beautiful. Thank you, Amelia. Thank you for this gift." "We made him together," Amelia said, reaching up to touch Maxwell's face. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names but had not decided for certain. Now, looking at his son, Maxwell said, "I would like to name him Benjamin after your father. He brought us together in a way. Without him, we would never have met." Amelia's eyes filled with tears. "I think that is perfect. Benjamin Xerxes." The weeks after Benjamin's birth were exhausting but joyful. Maxwell discovered a capacity for tenderness he had not known he possessed, spending hours just watching his son sleep, marveling at every tiny movement and sound. Amelia recovered her strength slowly, and they navigated the challenges of new parenthood together, laughing at their mistakes and celebrating each small success. As Benjamin grew, he became the center of their world. He was a happy baby, quick to smile, and he brought laughter back to the ranch. Mrs. Garcia declared him the finest baby she had ever seen, and even Jim and Tom became unlikely doting uncles, carving him toys and telling him stories he was far too young to understand. The years passed quickly, marked by the changing seasons and the rhythms of ranch life. Benjamin learned to walk and talk, following his father around like a shadow, already showing an interest in the horses and cattle. When he was 3, Amelia became pregnant again, and this time Maxwell was less fearful, trusting in his wife's strength and the knowledge that they could face anything together. Their second child, a daughter they named Rose, arrived in the spring of 1883, 5 years after Amelia had first come to the ranch. She had her mother's fair hair and her father's dark eyes, and she was adored from the moment she entered the world. Benjamin was fascinated by his little sister, wanting to help care for her, and the house rang with the sounds of children. The Double X Ranch prospered. With Amelia's help managing the business side, they expanded their herd and began breeding horses as well as cattle. They earned a reputation for quality stock and fair dealing. They hired more hands as the work grew, and the bunkhouse was often full. The ranch became a community, a place where hard-working men could earn a decent wage and be treated with respect. Amelia never forgot where she had come from or how uncertain her future had once seemed. She was active in Fort Garland, helping to establish a school and serving as a teacher when the regular teacher was ill. She befriended other ranch wives, creating a network of support and friendship that sustained all of them through the challenges of frontier life. She and Annabelle Thornton remained close, their children playing together on long summer afternoons. Maxwell changed too, becoming more open and social, quicker to smile and laugh. The darkness that had haunted him for so long faded, though it never completely disappeared. On certain nights, Amelia would find him standing by the window, looking toward the hill where his first wife and daughter were buried, and she would go to him and hold him, understanding that some griefs never entirely heal. But it no longer consumed him. He had learned to carry it as part of himself while still embracing the present and the future. In the fall of 1885, Amelia discovered she was pregnant for a third time. She was 31 now, Maxwell was 41, and they had thought their family was complete. But they welcomed the news with joy. This pregnancy was harder than the others, and Amelia was often tired and uncomfortable. Maxwell hovered over her constantly, much to her amusement and occasional irritation. Their third child, another son they named William, arrived in March of 1886, just as the valley was beginning to thaw after a brutal winter. He was a big baby, healthy and loud, and his arrival completed their family. Benjamin, now 8, and Rose, nearly 3, were enchanted with their new brother. The house that had once been so quiet and sad was now filled with noise and life. There were toys scattered across the floors, children's laughter echoing from the rafters, the constant activity of a growing family. Amelia sometimes paused in the middle of her work, amazed at how much her life had changed. She thought of that terrified young woman who had arrived with nothing but a letter, and she marveled at the journey that had brought her here. One evening, when William was about 6 months old, Amelia and Maxwell sat on the porch as they had so many times before. The children were asleep inside, the ranch was quiet, and the stars blazed overhead in the clear mountain air. "Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if you had not come here?" Maxwell asked, taking her hand. "Sometimes," Amelia admitted. "I think I would have survived somehow, but I would not have been happy. I would have just been getting by, existing but not really living." "I know what you mean," Maxwell said. "After Maria died, I was doing the same thing, just existing, waiting for time to pass. If you had not come, I think I would have stayed that way until the day I died." "My father knew what he was doing," Amelia said softly. "He knew I needed a home, but he also knew you needed someone to bring you back to life. He gave us both a gift." Maxwell raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I think about that letter sometimes, the one I sent you after he died. Come to the XX Ranch. There is a place for you here. I had no idea what I was really saying. I thought I was just fulfilling an obligation." "And now?" Amelia asked. "Now I know I was saying that you belonged here, that this was always meant to be your home, and I was always meant to be your husband." He pulled her close and she rested her head on his shoulder. "You belong here, Amelia, not because of a letter or a promise, but because this is where your heart is, and my heart is wherever you are. You told me that the day I arrived," Amelia remembered. "You said you belong here now. I thought you just meant I had a place to stay, but you were right in ways neither of us understood then." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead, listening to the sounds of the night. Inside, their children slept peacefully. Around them, the ranch they had built together stretched out into the darkness. And Amelia knew, with a certainty that filled her entire being, that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges. The children grew, each developing their own personalities and interests. Benjamin became a skilled horseman and ranch hand, learning the business from his father and showing a natural aptitude for it. Rose proved to have her mother's intelligence and love of learning, devouring every book she could find. William was the adventurous one, always climbing trees or exploring the far reaches of the ranch, giving his parents more than a few scares. Colorado changed around them too. The wild frontier was gradually being tamed, with more settlements, more laws, more civilization creeping in. The railroad came closer, making it easier to ship cattle and supplies. Fort Garland evolved from a rough frontier town into a more established community with a proper school, several churches, and even a library. Through it all, Amelia and Maxwell's love deepened and matured. They had their disagreements, of course, the normal friction of any marriage, but they had learned how to work through difficulties together. They supported each other through losses and celebrated each other's triumphs. When Mrs. Garcia passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1892, they mourned together and made sure her family was taken care of. When the ranch survived a terrible drought in 1893 that bankrupted several of their neighbors, they counted their blessings and helped those less fortunate. In the summer of 1895, Benjamin turned 17, and Maxwell began seriously training him to take over the ranch someday. Father and son rode together every day, inspecting the herds, mending fences, planning for the future. Amelia watched them and felt her heart swell with pride. Benjamin had grown into a fine young man, strong and capable but also kind and thoughtful. He was the best of both his parents. Rose, at 12, was already talking about becoming a teacher like her mother. She helped at the Fort Garland school during the summer, and she had a natural gift for explaining things and working with younger children. Amelia knew that Rose would leave the ranch someday to pursue her education, and while the thought made her sad, she was proud that her daughter had dreams and ambitions. William, at 9, was still young enough to be carefree, spending his days fishing in the creek, playing with the ranch dogs and pestering his older siblings. He kept them all laughing with his antics and his endless questions about everything. One evening in late summer, as the family sat around the dinner table, Benjamin announced that he had met a girl in town, the daughter of a merchant family who had recently moved to Fort Garland. "Her name is Sarah," he said, his ears reddening. "I was wondering if I could invite her and her family to Sunday dinner sometime." Amelia and Maxwell exchanged glances, both recognizing the signs of first love. "Of course," Amelia said warmly. "We would be happy to meet her." After dinner, as Amelia and Maxwell prepared for bed, they talked about their son's announcement. "He is growing up so fast," Amelia said, a touch of melancholy in her voice. "Soon he will be married and starting his own family." "And that is as it should be," Maxwell said, though Amelia could hear the same bittersweet note in his tone. "We have given them a good foundation. Now we have to trust that they will build good lives on it." "I know," Amelia said. "But I will miss having them all here, the house full of noise and chaos." Maxwell pulled her into his arms. "We will always have each other," he said, "and we will have grandchildren to spoil if Benjamin keeps looking at that girl the way I suspect he does." Amelia laughed and held him close. After all these years, his embrace still felt like home. They had built something beautiful together, not just the ranch but a life, a family, a legacy. And it had all started with a letter, a leap of faith, and a cowboy who had said, "You belong here now." The years rolled on, bringing all the joys and sorrows that life holds. Benjamin did indeed marry Sarah, in a lovely ceremony in the spring of 1898. They built a small house on the ranch property, and Sarah proved to be a wonderful addition to the family, hardworking and cheerful. Rose left for Denver in 1901 to attend normal school, her head full of dreams and her trunk full of books. She wrote home regularly, her letters brimming with excitement about her studies and the wider world she was discovering. William, as he grew older, surprised everyone by developing an interest in veterinary medicine. After a traveling veterinarian came through Fort Garland, and William spent a week following him around, asking questions, the boy announced his intention to study animal doctoring. Maxwell and Amelia supported his dream, setting aside money for his education. In the fall of 1902, Benjamin and Sarah welcomed the first grandchild, a healthy baby boy they named Maxwell Benjamin, called Max. Amelia held her grandson for the first time and felt the circle of life completing itself. She was a grandmother now, her hair streaked with silver, her hands showing the marks of years of hard work. But she felt blessed beyond measure. Maxwell, at 59, moved a bit more slowly than he once had, but he was still strong and vital, still the backbone of the ranch. He delighted in his grandson, carrying the baby around and telling him stories he was far too young to understand, just as he had done with his own children. The Double X Ranch was thriving, one of the most successful operations in the valley. But more than that, it was a home, filled with love and laughter and the promise of future generations. Amelia often thought about the younger version of herself, frightened and alone, clutching a letter and hoping for the best. She wished she could go back and tell that girl that everything would be all right, that the uncertain path she was embarking on would lead to more happiness than she could imagine. But of course, that was not how life worked. You had to walk through the fear and the uncertainty to get to the joy on the other side. And Amelia would not change a single step of her journey, even the painful ones, because they had all led her here, to this life, to this man, to this family. One crisp autumn afternoon, Amelia and Maxwell rode out together to a favorite spot on the ranch, a high meadow with a view of the entire valley. They had not had much time alone together lately, what with the bustle of the growing family, and they treasured these stolen moments. They dismounted and stood side by side, looking out at the land they had worked so hard to build. "You remember the first time we rode out here together?" Maxwell asked, his arm around her waist. "I do," Amelia said. "It was shortly after we were married. I was so happy I thought my heart would burst." "I felt the same way," Maxwell admitted. "I kept thinking I did not deserve to be that happy again after everything that had happened. But you taught me that it was all right to move forward, to embrace life instead of just enduring it." Amelia turned to face him, reaching up to touch his weathered face. "We taught each other," she said. "You gave me a home when I had nothing. You gave me love when I had given up hope of ever finding it. We saved each other, Maxwell." He kissed her then, a long, sweet kiss that still had the power to make her heart race even after all these years. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. "I love you, Amelia Xerxes," Maxwell said. "I have loved you from the moment you refused to stay inside during that first storm, and I will love you until my last breath." "And I love you," Amelia replied. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, and I thank God every day that my father sent me that letter, that you welcomed me, that you gave me a chance to belong somewhere." They stood together in the meadow as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The mountains stood eternal around them, and the valley spread out below, dotted with the homes and ranches of the community they were part of. Somewhere in the distance, they could hear the sound of cattle lowing and a dog barking, the sounds of home. As they rode back to the ranch as the light faded, Amelia thought about the long road that had brought her here. From that terrifying moment, when the lawyer had told her she was alone and penniless, to the desperate hope she had felt clutching that letter, to the fear and uncertainty of arriving at an unknown place to meet an unknown man. And then all the joy that had followed, falling in love, building a life together, raising children, creating a legacy. The ranch house came into view, lights glowing warmly in the windows. She could see Benjamin and Sarah's house nearby, smoke curling from the chimney. She thought of Rose in Denver, pursuing her dreams, and William preparing to do the same. She thought of little Max, the first of what would hopefully be many grandchildren. She thought of all the people who had touched their lives over the years, the friends and neighbors and hired hands who had become like family. And she thought of that day, so long ago now, when she had arrived with nothing but a letter and Maxwell had looked at her and said, "You belong here now." He had not known how prophetic those words were, how absolutely and completely true they would become. This was where she belonged, where she had always been meant to be. As they unsaddled the horses and walked hand in hand toward the house, Amelia felt a deep, abiding peace. Her life had not been easy and she knew challenges still lay ahead. But she had love, she had family, she had a purpose and a place in the world. She had everything that truly mattered. The door opened and Sarah stepped out, holding baby Max. "I was starting to worry," she said with a smile. "Supper is almost ready." "We are home now," Maxwell said, reaching out to take his grandson. The baby gurgled happily, and Maxwell's face softened in the way it always did around children. Amelia followed them inside, into the warmth and light and love that filled this house. Behind her, the door closed against the gathering night, shutting out the cold and darkness. Inside was everything good, everything worth having, everything she had ever hoped for and more. She belonged here now, and she always would. This was home. This was family. This was love. And it had all started with a letter, a cowboy, and 5 simple words. "You belong here now." Years continued to unfold with their mixture of joy and sorrow, growth and change. The 20th century arrived, bringing with it new technologies and ways of thinking. The ranch adapted and evolved, but its heart remained the same. It was still a place of hard work and honest living, still a home where family came first. Rose returned from Denver in 1904, diploma in hand, and took a position teaching at Fort Garland School. She boarded in town during the week, but came home on weekends, filling the house with stories of her students and her ambitions for improving the school. A year later, she married a young lawyer named David Morrison, and they settled in Fort Garland, determined to make their mark on the growing community. William left for veterinary college in 1905, though he promised to return and set up practice in the valley when he finished his studies. Amelia missed him terribly, but she was proud of his determination to follow his calling. He wrote regularly, his letters full of enthusiasm for his studies and the new world he was discovering. Benjamin and Sarah had 2 more children, a daughter named Amelia in honor of her grandmother, and another son they called James. The ranch house often echoed with the shouts and laughter of grandchildren, and Amelia discovered that being a grandmother was perhaps even more delightful than being a mother. She could spoil them and play with them, and then hand them back when they grew tired or fussy. Maxwell, now in his 60s, finally began to slow down a bit. He let Benjamin take over more of the day-to-day management of the ranch, though he still insisted on riding out every day to check on things. "I will rest when I am dead," he told Amelia when she suggested he take it easier. But he said it with a smile, and she knew he was happier staying active than he would be sitting idle. In 1908, they celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary with a large party at the ranch. It seemed like everyone in the valley came to honor them, testament to the respect they had earned over the decades. There were toasts and dancing and stories told about the early days. Rose and David were there with their young son. William came home from school for the occasion. Benjamin and Sarah and their growing brood filled the house with noise and energy. As Amelia stood on the porch that evening, watching the celebration, Maxwell came up beside her and slipped his arm around her waist. "Happy?" he asked. "Happier than I have any right to be," Amelia replied, leaning into him. 30 years. Can you believe it?" "Some days it feels like 30 years, Maxwell said with a chuckle. "Other days it feels like we just got married yesterday. But every single day, I have been grateful that you came here, that you took a chance on an old broken-down cowboy who had forgotten how to live." "You were never broken down," Amelia protested. "Just grieving. And you helped me as much as I helped you. We saved each other, remember?" "I remember," Maxwell said softly. He turned her to face him, and in the lamplight from the house, she could see the love in his eyes, as strong now as it had been in the beginning. "Here is to 30 more years," he said. 30 more years, Amelia agreed, though she knew it was unlikely they would both live that long. But it did not matter. What mattered was that they had found each other, had built this life together, had created something beautiful and lasting. The party went on late into the night, and when everyone had finally left or settled down to sleep, Amelia and Maxwell sat together by the dying fire, holding hands and watching the embers glow. They did not need to speak. After 30 years together, they could communicate entire conversations with a glance or a touch. More years passed, bringing continued blessings. William returned from college in 1910 and set up a veterinary practice in Fort Garland, much to the delight of ranchers throughout the valley who had been struggling with sick animals and no proper treatment available. He married a sweet-natured girl named Helen, the daughter of the local doctor, and they bought a small house in town. The grandchildren continued to grow and thrive. Max, Benjamin's eldest, showed signs of following in his father's and grandfather's footsteps, with a natural affinity for horses and cattle. Little Amelia was bright and curious, always asking questions. The younger children brought constant joy and occasional chaos. In the spring of 1912, Amelia woke one morning to find Maxwell still in bed, which was highly unusual. He was always up before dawn, no matter what. "Are you all right?" she asked, touching his forehead to check for fever. "Just tired," Maxwell said, but there was something in his voice that worried her. "I think I will rest a bit longer." Over the next few weeks, it became clear that something was wrong. Maxwell was increasingly fatigued, and he began to have trouble catching his breath after even simple exertion. William, with his medical training, was the first to voice what everyone was thinking. "His heart is failing," he said quietly to Amelia one evening. "I do not know how much time he has, maybe a few months, maybe a year, but it is not going to get better." Amelia felt the bottom drop out of her world. She had known, intellectually, that they would not live forever, that one of them would eventually have to face life without the other. But knowing it and confronting it were two different things. Maxwell was her anchor, her partner, her love. How could she possibly face a world without him? But she was strong, and she rallied. She would make whatever time he had left as good as possible. She made sure he was comfortable, that he did not overtax himself, but also that he still felt useful and involved in the ranch. She sat with him for hours, reading to him, talking with him, simply being near him. They reminisced about their life together, all the moments that had made up their years. "You have any regrets?" Maxwell asked her one afternoon as they sat on the porch, watching storm clouds gather over the mountains. "Only that we do not have more time," Amelia said honestly. But no, I do not regret any of the choices we made or the life we built. Do you? Not a single one, Maxwell said. Except perhaps that I was too stubborn in the beginning, too wrapped up in my grief to see the gift that was right in front of me. If I had been smarter, I would have fallen in love with you the moment you stepped off that stagecoach. Amelia smiled through her tears. You fell in love with me at exactly the right time, she said. Neither of us was ready any sooner, and the waiting made it all the sweeter. Maxwell reached for her hand, his grip not as strong as it once was but still warm and familiar. Promise me something, he said. Promise me you will not shut yourself away after I am gone. Keep living, keep loving. Be there for our children and grandchildren. Do not let grief consume you the way I let it consume me after Maria died. That is not fair, Amelia said, her voice breaking. How can I promise that? You are asking me to be strong when I feel like I am falling apart. Because you are stronger than I ever was, Maxwell said. And because I need to know you will be all right. That is the only thing that makes this bearable, knowing that you will go on and be happy. Amelia could not speak. She just held his hand and cried, and Maxwell pulled her close and let her. The summer of 1912 was bittersweet. Maxwell's health continued to decline, but he faced it with a grace and acceptance that Amelia tried to emulate. The family rallied around, with Benjamin managing the ranch, the grandchildren visiting often to brighten his days, and Amelia never leaving his side unless absolutely necessary. In late August, on a warm afternoon with the windows open and a breeze blowing through the house, Maxwell called the whole family together. They gathered in the main room, all the children and grandchildren, and Maxwell looked at each of them in turn from his chair by the window. I want you all to know, he said, his voice weak but clear, that I have been blessed beyond measure. I have had a good life, a full life because of all of you. Take care of each other, take care of this land, and take care of your mother and grandmother. She is the heart of this family, and she always has been. There were tears and hugs, and words of love spoken that needed to be said. As evening fell, the family gradually dispersed, though Benjamin and Sarah stayed in the main house to be close. Amelia helped Maxwell to bed, and they lay together in the darkness, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her. I love you, Maxwell whispered. I have loved you every day since you came here, and I will love you beyond this life. I love you too, Amelia said, her tears soaking into his nightshirt. Thank you for giving me a home, for giving me a family, for giving me a life I never dreamed I could have. You gave me all of that too, Maxwell said. Thank you for coming to the ranch with nothing but that letter. Thank you for staying. Thank you for loving me. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, and sometime in the night, so quietly and peacefully that Amelia did not even wake, Maxwell drew his last breath. When Amelia opened her eyes in the morning, she knew immediately that he was gone. The room felt different, emptier. She lay there for a long moment, holding him, saying her final goodbye. Then she kissed his forehead, closed his eyes gently, and rose to tell the family. The grief was profound, a deep ache that suffused every part of her being. But Amelia remembered her promise. She would not let it consume her. She would honor Maxwell's memory by living fully, by being there for their family, by carrying on the work they had started together. They buried Maxwell on the hill behind the house, next to Maria and the daughter he had lost so long ago. It seemed fitting somehow, all of them together, the loves of his life. The whole valley turned out for the funeral, testament to the man Maxwell had been and the impact he had made. In the days and weeks that followed, Amelia found her footing. She woke each morning, did her work, helped Benjamin run the ranch, spent time with the grandchildren. She cried when she needed to, talked about Maxwell often, and slowly learned to carry the grief instead of being crushed by it. She discovered strength she had not known she possessed, just as Maxwell had said she would. A year after Maxwell's death, on a warm summer evening, Amelia stood on the porch watching the sunset. Benjamin came out to join her, now a man in his mid-30s, capable and strong, so much like his father it sometimes took her breath away. "Are you all right, Mother?" he asked gently. "I am," Amelia said, and she meant it. "I miss him every day, but I am all right. He gave me so much, taught me so much. I owe it to him to keep living well." "He loved you very much," Benjamin said. "I remember when I was young, before I really understood what I was seeing, I would watch the two of you together and think that was what I wanted someday. Someone to look at me the way Father looked at you. And you found it," Amelia said warmly. "Sarah is wonderful, and I am so glad you have each other." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, and then Benjamin said, "I have been thinking. This ranch, it is our family's legacy. Father and you built it together. And I want to make sure we honor that we keep it strong not just for us but for Max and Amelia and James, for all the generations that come after. I was hoping you would help me, share your knowledge and experience." Amelia felt a swell of pride and purpose. "I would be honored," she said. "Your father and I always planned for this place to continue, for it to be a home for our family for generations to come. Let us make sure that happens." And so they worked together, mother and son, to secure the future of the Double X Ranch. Amelia proved to have a sharp mind for business and a wealth of practical knowledge. Together with Benjamin, they weathered economic downturns, droughts, harsh winters, and all the challenges that came their way. The years continued to pass, and Amelia lived to see her children well established and happy, her grandchildren growing into fine young adults, and even the first of her great-grandchildren born. She became a matriarch in the truest sense, the wise elder whom everyone turned to for advice and comfort. She stayed active and engaged, never withdrawing from life even as it brought its share of sorrows along with joys. On a crisp autumn day in 1925, Amelia turned 70. The family threw a huge party at the ranch, with seemingly half the county in attendance. As she looked around at the celebration, at all the faces of the people she loved, at the land that had been her home for nearly 50 years, she felt profoundly grateful. Her life had been long and full, marked by love and purpose and meaning. She had arrived with nothing but a letter, frightened and uncertain, and she had found everything she had ever needed and more than she had ever dreamed of. That evening, as the party wound down and the guests began to leave, Amelia walked slowly up the hill behind the house to the small, fenced cemetery. She stood before Maxwell's grave, reading the simple headstone. Maxwell Xerxes, beloved husband and father, 1847–1912. "I kept my promise," she said softly. "I did not shut myself away. I kept living, kept loving, kept being there for our family. They are all doing so well, Maxwell. Benjamin has made the ranch even more successful than we ever dreamed. Rose is the head of the whole school district now. William has built a thriving practice and trained 2 younger veterinarians. And the grandchildren, you would be so proud of them. Max is already talking about running for town council. Our little Amelia just started college. They are all strong and good and full of life." She paused, her eyes blurring with tears. "I miss you, though. Every single day I miss you. I miss your voice, your laugh, the way you used to hold me, but I am all right. You taught me how to be strong, how to keep going, and I have carried you with me every step of the way." A breeze rustled through the grass, and Amelia smiled through her tears. "I will come back and visit again soon," she promised. "But for now, I have a house full of family waiting for me and cake to eat and grandchildren who want to hear stories. Thank you, my love. Thank you for everything." She made her way slowly back down the hill, back toward the ranch house where lights blazed warmly in the gathering dusk, and laughter spilled out into the night. She paused on the porch to look back one more time at the land spread out before her, the mountains rising eternal in the distance, the valley she had called home for nearly 5 decades. She thought of that terrified young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach with nothing but a letter and a desperate hope. She thought of Maxwell, standing there so serious and solemn, offering her a refuge when she had nowhere else to go. She thought of his words that first day. "You belong here now." How right he had been. She had belonged here, heart and soul, from that very first day. This land, this family, this life, it had all been waiting for her. The letter had brought her here, but love had made her stay. Love had built everything that mattered, everything that endured. Amelia went inside, closing the door behind her, and was immediately surrounded by the warmth and noise of her family. Her son offered her a piece of cake. Her daughter-in-law poured her a cup of tea. A great-grandchild climbed into her lap, asking for a story. And Amelia, filled with contentment and peace, began to tell the tale of how she had come to the ranch with nothing but a letter, and how a cowboy had said she belonged here now, and how those words had been the beginning of everything good and beautiful in her life. Outside, the stars began to appear one by one in the darkening sky, the same stars that had witnessed every moment of her journey. And somewhere, perhaps, Maxwell was watching too, smiling at the life they had built together, the legacy they had left, the love that continued to ripple out through the generations. The story had come full circle, and it was a good ending, a happy ending, an ending that was really just another beginning for all the lives that would continue on the Double X Ranch for years and generations to come. Amelia had found her place, had built her home, had lived a life of purpose and love. And in the end, that was all anyone could hope for. She had belonged here, truly and completely, and she always would.